Welcome to the TCG Compass podcast, presented by Amber Grading, a mostly weekly discussion on trading card games and the people who love them.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniel. I'll be your host today. Today I'm joined by my co-host Mark.
How's it going?
Good. On today's show, we're going to talk about how sometimes we wish we were kids again.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what Magic was like for us when we were growing up, learning how to play the game, and the nostalgic feeling that rolls along with it, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember when we were kids, around 8 or 9 years old. I remember going over to your house and teaching you how to play Magic. Do you have any memories that stand out from that time period?
What I remember is, you learn a little bit about the game, right? You learn when you're looking at a card, the easiest way to kind of show somebody how it works was just to take a card and show me, well, this is the name of the card. Here's the casting cost. This is the power and toughness down here. And I remember that sense of almost wonder, because you're looking at one card from the next through the stack of cards, and everything that you're looking at is brand new. So you have no idea what you're going to see. You don't really know how it works, and you certainly have no way to evaluate what's good and what's bad. But there was just that sense of you just had no idea what was next, and every card was new, and I miss that about Magic.
Right. Yeah, I still remember, and it's still true to today, that whenever a player learns Magic, they are almost instinctively drawn to like life gain. They're like, oh, well, if I gain life, it'll be harder to kill me, rather than like, I need to deal 20 damage as fast as I can, or I need to just make sure my opponent doesn't beat me, or, but it always seemed like they kind of instinctively would go into the wrong strategic direction. Do you have any, did you experience that?
Well, yeah, and certainly it takes a long time for newer players to learn that your life total is a resource, right? So when you look at things like Dark Confidant and City of Brass, it's like, well, why would I want to do this? Why would I want to damage myself? And you don't understand that your life is just another resource for you to use. And as long as your opponent hits 0 before you do, it doesn't matter how much life life you have left over when it's all done. And that's a really hard concept for new players to look at. But I remember thinking almost everything that dealt damage to me was just trash when I was new. I was like, Pestilence, like, no thanks. Yeah. Not only does it kill me, but it kills all my own creatures. Yeah. Like, this got to be the worst card ever, and you just have no idea. Just evaluating cards that way it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, I had 4 Stream of Lives in almost every single deck I built for the first few years I played Magic, for exactly that reason. It's just like, well, if I'm at 35, like, you're never going to kill me, But what ends up happening is you just die before you ever cast like a meaningful Stream of Life,
Or, you gain a whole bunch of life and it doesn't matter because you're so behind on the board state and down on cards that you just eventually lose that game anyways. So it wasn't until they started printing creatures that had lifelink, where you could get something meaningful on the battlefield that was both developing your game plan and gaining you life, that it really started to become worthwhile. But that's not something that it's intuitive to new players,
Right. Well, I think lifelink has been a part of the game of Magic since the very beginning, although they called it something different. It was a triggered ability that said whatever this creature deals damage, you gain that much life. And then eventually it became a keyword, and it works a little bit differently. But yeah, I remember one of my favorite cards, I think it was from Mirage. It was like Zebra Unicorn, and it was a 4-mana 2/2 with essentially like lifelink. And
I think that was more my point, is like, it existed, right? But it wasn't good until now, right? So like all the things that used to gain you life, just none of them were particularly good.
I also remember when I saw that card for the very first time, I was like, man, they are running out of ideas. Like, how can they keep this going? They're already at Zebra Unicorn, like.
It's not looking good.
They were able to turn it around, thank God. But yeah, I remember then, and also with Fallen Empires and Homelands, it was like, wow, they're not going in a good direction right now. But do you remember any of the old house rules that we had when we were playing as kids?
I remember when I first learned how to play with you and your brother and a couple of other people, that I think there was a house rule, or we thought it was the actual rule, where you weren't limited to playing one land per turn. So you just got to put all of your lands out and start casting things right away. Yeah. And as you can imagine, that had a huge impact on the game, and it didn't work the way that it was supposed to. We never understood why low casting cost cards were valuable, right? Like every one casting cost creature was terrible when you can just put 4 lands onto the battlefield on turn 1 and you're immediately outclassed by whatever it is that your opponent's playing. So yeah, I do remember learning the game that way, and then having to almost relearn how to do it correctly as we picked up a rule book and said, hey, we weren't taught to play this way, but apparently we've been playing wrong.
So I remember the rule book being more of like, well, we need to know how to do something. Let's go read it. Not let's read the rule book and then learn how to play the correct way, if that makes sense. It was like more of a reference than a manual.
I remember first strike intuitively to us meant that it got to strike the first turn that it was out. And so we were playing that first strike meant haste until we read a creature that said that it was unaffected by summoning sickness. And we're like, well, what does that mean? Why didn't they just use first strike? And then we look it up and go, oh, well, we don't know what we're doing.
Well, that's another one of those things that it wasn't a keyword at the time. Haste wasn't a thing. It was unaffected by summoning sickness, and it effectively works identically as haste, but it wasn't the keyword. So, and then because we didn't really know like what was going on, Nick, I think we had like a sort of like a beta rule book, and there was like this big, so it was like kind of hard to know whether we were playing the correct way because the rules changed.
It's talking about ante and stuff. And
like I don't want to give up my cards. Like that sounds terrible.
Right. And it's in that tiny print that came on the one that came inside the starter deck, and you're like, what is going on? I can't see. I can't see what this means. I do remember though, like just. Every time that we opened the rule book to figure out how something worked, we realized that we were playing at least one aspect of the game incorrectly. And we spent a good amount of time that way. It was always fun, but it was it didn't get correct for quite a while.
Well, that's the great thing about Magic in particular is that you can play a lot of things wrong and still have a good time, and the game will still function. Which is really fun because it's like, well, I think this works this way, and as long as you both agree and you both play it the same way, then the game still works.
That's the Warhammer rules, by the way. There's something in the rule book that tells you that as long as you and your opponent agree on what's going on, that's the principal thing to deal with. And it's like you're not supposed to open the rule book and rule book each other to death while you're in the middle of a game.
Yeah, it definitely makes it a lot more fun. And it's one of the reasons why being a kid again would be so much fun is because it's like, you're like learning this new thing and, just immersing yourself into this world for the first time. And I just remember, I think the very first card I ever had was a Felden's Cane. My brother gave it to me. And I just remember staring at the art of this card for hours just because I was like, I just kept finding new things to look at. And I didn't even care that it was a game at the time. I just was like, wow, this is really amazing. And then I think Ashnod's Transmogrant was another one of my really early cards. It was just like, wow, like the art on here is amazing. And I remember like feeling a certain way every time I look at the cards, like Crawworm, for example, like just looking at a Crawworm for the first time. It's like, how does anybody beat this card? It's like, it's a 6/4. It's like, this thing's insane. And then of course in Ice Age, we got Scaled Worm and it's like, now I got a 7/6. I never need another card ever again. But. Yeah,
and I miss that, right? So we're talking about what it would be like to be kids again, but the card evaluation skills, back before you learn on the internet or learn through experience playing tournaments or whatever that cards are supposed to be bad. Oh, this card's bad. It's not good, right? Like once you learn that, it's so much harder to have a good time with it. And when you make that transition into being a competitive Magic player and you start playing in tournaments and you start looking at what the professional players are having success with and why, and you start reading about theory and reading about mana curves and reading about making your source counts work for all of your color demand and all that, like you can't unlearn any of that information. And now it completely just warps the way. And it's not all for the worse. But it's one of those things where every once in a while it would be nice to just unlearn all of that and go back in time to what Magic was like when we were brand new, casting armor of thorns on our random creatures and playing stone hands and the brute and all these like cool creature enchantments and auras from back in the day they're all terrible cards. But
Bloodlust. All the cards that have like
Bloodlust is legit.
Oh yeah, still played in 93, 94.
Sure.
Super good card. But yeah, I still remember having a red-green regeneration deck around like Urza's Destiny when that came out, and just like, man, regeneration is like so good. Like, how could you ever like, beat me? But at the time, the majority of removal spells all said, creature can't be regenerated. So it like really limited the effectiveness of regeneration at the time. And of course, we never played it correctly too,
And when you're playing across the table from somebody else who's a super casual player, being able to regenerate every time that your creatures would trade in combat is really busted. And then you take that same concept to somebody that knows what they're doing, and all of their removal at the time is Swords to Plowshares or Wrath of God and Terror, and you're just like, well, their removal is way better than whatever I'm doing. Like I thought my deck was good, but I don't know did not know what I was doing.
Yeah, I think it was like Gaia's Embrace was like. That card was so good, like beefs my creature up, gives it regeneration. It's just like, this thing's insane.
+3, trample and regenerate, man, for 4 mana. It's a good deal.
Try and beat me.
Right.
Yeah, enchantments, it's changed nowadays with the enchantment decks being really well supported and being really good decks. But, back in the day, they were bad, but they were really flavorful. And, for whatever reason, I always wanted to play with enchantments just because... it gave you an opportunity to make your creature better instead of just playing another creature that was actually better.
That was already better.
Yeah, right. But like the allure of playing like a Gaia's Embrace on top of an already Raincord Ornithopter was just like the OP play to me at the time.
Well, you were playing against me, and my deck was equally as bad, right? So like when you get to play when we're trading Gaia's Embrace types of cards back and forth. Gaia's Embrace is a fine card. When you start playing with the guy who's going to lightning bolt your creature in response to you paying 4 mana for, then all of a sudden the cards become bad. And so you take that next step and you become more competitive and you want to learn more. And then that you can't undo it. You can't unlearn it.
Well, to be fair, back then there was no stack, and damage worked a little bit differently. You had interrupts and instants, and so the rules were a little more confusing to a newer player. So we kind of just did like the best that we could with the information we had, and obviously we were really young too, so it was just kind of like making the best of the game for what it was.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, there's even though it was wrong, it still functioned. It's just the game itself just has the skeleton of it is sound, right? And so even when you do a couple of things incorrectly, it still worked. But I mean, yeah, I remember it's I've got great memories of it and so much nostalgia that's rolled up into Magic in the early and mid 90s before we really moved into more competitive. And there's a lot of great things that came out of that, right? And trying to get better and learning and becoming good Magic players, right? There's a huge benefit to that too. But every once in a while, it'd be nice to kind of be able to rewind just for a day and get that feeling.
I know my first tournament was at Big Kids to Comics. It was up by your house. And, there was defined formats at the time. I think it was Type 1, Type 2, or Type 1, Type 1.5. But nobody ever really followed them. There wasn't a judge to do deck checks or anything. It was kind of like you just put 60 cards into a deck and went and played.
You show up.
Yep.
You show up, take the rubber band off your deck, sit down, and and shuffle it up and play.
Yep, absolutely. It was a really good time. And then prizes back then were real loose too. It was like a box, or not a booster box, but like an empty box that you can put your cards in.
Yeah, whatever they had floating. Yeah, sure. Here you go. You can have this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you get 5 free cards out of the 25-cent box, right.
Sweet. Totally worth the buy-in and all of the effort.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. No, I do. And then just slowly every week trying to come back with something that was going to be a little bit better than the week before. And that's basically how the addiction to tournament Magic starts, right? Is like... You play something, you take your casual deck to the tournament, and then you spend the next week trying to figure out what just happened to you.
Well, and you know what really set it apart between then and now, though, was the resource constraints, because even if you had all the money, like you couldn't just get whatever you wanted because there wasn't like an internet place to go buy cards that you wanted. You had to go find it from other players, or you had to drive around to all the stores and see and hope that they had the cards that you wanted to make your deck better. I do remember the very first booster box I ever got was for my birthday. It was Urza's Destiny, and I had to order it from Troll and Toad, and it was through a Scry advertisement. You had to like call them and place the order and hope that your parents would like give the credit card number up, or mail them.
You and I split that order.
Yeah, we did.
You and I split that order, and we each got a box.
Yeah, super good.
And I think one of us opened a foiled Emperor Crocodile, and we were super happy about it.
Yeah, card got re-rarity'd. It's now common.
It is.
But like we were so stoked at the time. It was like Masticore, I really want this 4 to bring out 5/5 that dies. It was like,
yes, we did.
Such a good time. Yeah, it was a really cool memory.
Yeah, there's so many things like that. I remember picking up my first curse scroll. I scooped it up when I traded a Throne of Bone to somebody because they were playing black and they just really wanted to gain some life with their artifacts. So I remember that was a good trade on my behalf. But then I didn't think the curse scroll was particularly good either, and I traded it to somebody who knew what they were doing and got a bunch of crap in return. So
yeah, I know around Exodus time I traded my I think I had like 2 or 3 Survival of Fittest, and I was trading them for Durkal Worms. It's like it was actually the Tempest pre-release card, but I didn't know that at the time. And the card is just really, really bad. It's like a 5 mana that has power equal to the number of lands that you control.
I think it gets a +1/+1 counter every time that you play a land, and it starts off as like a 2/3 or a 3/4 or something.
It's awful. The card is awful. But I just thought it was like I was trading my Gaia's Cradles for Yavimaya Hollows for my regeneration deck, during Ursa's Saga.
Gotta regenerate, man.
Yeah, right. And like, man, just such bad deals. But like, we got the cards we wanted. It's like, well, I already have 1 Gaia's Cradle. I don't need 2. So I might as well get this Yavimaya Hollow.
It's legendary.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the rule says. I guess in retrospect, the deal kind of seemed a lot better at the time, even if the value was off. But yeah, looking back at it in retrospect, it's like, ew, why? I do remember getting rid of all my Force of Wills because it's just like, I'm never going to play blue ever. Like, I'll just never do it. So
and this goes back to paying life for stuff too.
Yeah, right.
I have to pay life. I have to discard an extra card, and it's blue. I don't want to have anything to do with this.
Yeah, it's like, that's way too much. The cost is just way too high. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, it took a while to learn that, especially when we started as kids. When adults learn how to play Magic and they sit down, they have a different approach to it. They want to learn immediately what's good and what's not and why.
Yeah.
Whereas we're just like looking, man, the art on this card is super cool. This fire elemental looks amazing. I got to get it in my deck somehow.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling that I want to be able to re-experience,
Exactly. Yeah, it would be nice to have a set that came out that had all old borders and like the old bottom text line that was just the artist, and then eventually the year. That'd be so cool. I know it probably never happened, but getting to relive some of that would be pretty amazing.
We need to set up a 4th edition draft, man.
Yeah, actually, I have some sealed 4th edition tournament decks right there.
Done. Done. We'll make some terrible limited decks out of those and see what we can put together.
Yeah, that reminds me of the 25th anniversary. I think it was at a Grand Prix. They did a beta draft.
I watched that coverage. I think.
Yeah, the decks were just awful.
It's rough.
You got a 4 to bring out a 3/3, like vanilla 3/3. It's like your deck was busted.
Oh yeah.
You had a way to kill them. Like, cool. Because it really wasn't a lot of win cons. It was just like really low.
And you were starved on cards.
Yeah.
Because there's so many. A good percentage of your pack is all basic lands, right? Yeah. So like you just have to take anything that can possibly win the game for you, and hope that you. Hope that you open that Rod of Ruin.
Yeah, like virtually no fixing, unless you opened up a dual land or something. Like,
one. Yeah,
that's pretty bad. Well, yeah, I think we're getting to the end of our time here, though. So, Mark, where can our viewers and listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at WTWLF123, or you can find all my content and articles on MTG Salvation.
Awesome. And to get in touch with us, just go ahead and look in the episode description or head over to ambergrading.com/TCG Compass. We'd love to hear from you.
That's our show for today. Thanks for joining us on the TCG Compass podcast. I've been your co-host, Mark.
And I've been your host, Daniel. We'll see you next time.
This has been the TCG Compass podcast, presented by Amber Grading. Thanks for listening. You can find us at ambergrading.com/TCG Compass, at Amber Grading on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, or drop us an email, tcgcompass@ambergrading.com.